Hey there, I'm Clara Dotson, and this is my cultural anthropology project for Anthropology 101, and I'm focusing on policing in Baltimore. Baltimore City is my hometown. I live like 20 minutes outside of it, and here are just some basics, demographics and statistics. The population as of 2022, and some race demographics because that becomes relevant when we start talking about the issue. There we go. So, police brutality in Baltimore is a huge issue, and very relevant today. Recently, this television show called We Own This City just came out, talking specifically about the crimes of the Gun Trace Task Force, which was essentially like this group within the department that was supposed to be basically like tracking and disposing of guns that they found, but they ended up just doing crimes. So there was a show made about that. There's actually several shows about the policing system in Baltimore, which might give you an idea on just how almost cartoonishly corrupt it is at times. And statistically, the most vulnerable people are those in poverty and non-white people. So, my research question is, how can community outreach programs and harm reduction, so that would be stuff like methadone clinics and just behavioral health services, how can that reduce the amount of police brutality and abuse that these vulnerable populations are facing? And the theory is that because police brutality is such a massive systemic problem, like it would be impossible for me to try and tackle that on my own. But by providing resources to vulnerable populations that are most often targeted by the police, it will essentially keep them out of the way of the police. So, for example, if you have somebody that's experiencing a kind of like mental breakdown, something psychotic possibly, they wouldn't have to call the police to get help. They would be able to call one of the behavioral health resource hotlines, and that puts them at a significantly smaller risk than dealing with the police, because instead of dealing with relatively untrained people that often escalate situations, they would be dealing directly with mental health professionals. And so some potential partners would be the Turning Point Clinic in Baltimore. They do methadone treatment, and they also provide services to those that are looking to um, deal with their substance abuse issues. And then the behavioral health system, because that provides a wide range of different kinds of services to the impoverished, the homeless, those with substance abuse issues. And, both of these would be good organizations to work with. So for my methods, it would be largely like interviewing people at methadone clinics and homeless shelters and other behavioral health centers. There would be a bit of a focus on just what their lives are like, and also specifically like their interactions with the police, just to get a sense of how the police treat these people on a regular basis. And then both employees and patrons would be interviewed, because employees run the place, so they also have a good sense of how the police interact with these communities and with them as well. And patron interviews are prioritized just because of the nature of the project. So ethical concerns would be too much attention on these very vulnerable populations, and a way to combat that would be explicit consent from anyone that you interview, like letting them know the details of the project and what they would be contributing to. And then also fake names can be used. And if it's like a video interview, you can blur their faces, use voice modulators, just anything to make them comfortable. Benefits would be creating safer environments for vulnerable people, especially working with the behavioral health groups, and it would just make it easier for anybody to get the help that they need without having to interact with the police, and hopefully decreasing police violence. And the concepts that the anthropological concepts that this focuses on are racialization, structural violence, and the biocultural paradigm. So racialization and structural violence kind of go hand in hand because a lot of the issue in Baltimore is because there's such a large Black population. A lot of the issue is that those communities are targeted. And then structural violence in Baltimore. Baltimore has a massive issue with redlining, and it's essentially segregation. The way that poor communities are blocked off from resources, and that is because those are typically places where Black people live or were forced to live by city planning. And then structural violence, the police department is a government agency that harms these communities a lot. And then the biocultural paradigm, because of things like racialization and structural violence, people are experiencing biological problems, homelessness and substance abuse have very physical effects on a person because of the cultural concepts of race. Right. And to sum everything up, the focus of my project is to center and promote behavioral health services to vulnerable people in Baltimore that are often at risk of police brutality because of the fact that there are limited resources for people. Everything pretty much goes to the police, and the police are not trained to deal with like mental health crises. So by promoting behavioral health services, it keeps these people out of harm's way, essentially. And this also decreases the necessity for the police system, which decreases the possibility of police violence. And that is my project. Thank you.